Sarah Chen sat in the back row of the massive conference hall, her small frame barely visible among the towering alien delegates. The Nexus Prime station hummed with energy around them, its artificial gravity keeping hundreds of different species comfortable in the same space. She watched quietly as after being stood up to speak about humanity's application to join the Galactic Defense Coalition. The Krillian delegate rose first, his crystalline body catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. When he spoke, his voice sounded like glass chimes in a storm. "The humans want to join our coalition," he said, and the sound that came from his throat might have been laughter. "Look at them. They are made of soft meat and thin skin. On my world, the wind itself would cut them to pieces." Other delegates joined in with their own sounds of amusement. The Vorthak ambassador, covered in thick scales that could stop plasma fire, hissed his agreement. "These creatures cannot even breathe our air without machines. They die if the temperature changes too much. How can such weak beings help defend the galaxy?" Sarah kept her face calm, even as her hands tightened slightly in her lap. She had heard these arguments before during the long journey to reach this place. The other human diplomats had prepared her for the mockery, but hearing it in person still stung. A Zephyrian delegate buzzed to life, its insect-like wings creating a low humming sound. "I have studied their biology." It clicked through its mandibles. "Their bones break under pressure that would barely scratch our children. Their muscles are weaker than most species' relaxed state. They live for such a short time that they barely have a chance to learn anything useful." The hall filled with more sounds of agreement. Some delegates clicked, others hissed, and a few made noises that Sarah's translator could not even convert into words. She understood the meaning well enough. "Look at the data," continued the Zephyrian, projecting holographic charts into the air above the assembly. "Human strength minimal. Human speed adequate at best. Human durability laughable. They require artificial environments to survive in space. They need special suits to walk on most planets. Even their homeworld would kill many of our species' elderly, yet they struggle to survive on it themselves." Sarah's colleague, Ambassador Torres, leaned over to whisper in her ear. "Perhaps we should request to speak now. This is getting worse by the minute." Sarah shook her head slightly. She wanted to hear everything they had to say. As a former military engineer, she had learned that you should always gather all available intelligence before making any move. The hegemony representative stood next, its multiple arms gesturing dramatically. "We have fought wars that lasted longer than their entire recorded history. We have built civilizations that span star systems, while they still fight over small pieces of land on one planet. How can we trust our defense to beings who cannot even unite their own species?" More agreement rippled through the hall. Sarah noticed that not every delegate was participating in the mockery. Some sat quietly watching and listening. She recognized a few species that had reputation for being more thoughtful and less quick to judge. But they were clearly in the minority. "Their technology is primitive," added another voice from somewhere in the crowd. "They only recently learned to leave their atmosphere. Most of our member species achieved interstellar travel before these humans even discovered fire. And their social development," chimed in the Vorthak again. "They still have wars among themselves. They pollute their own environment. They create weapons designed specifically to kill their own kind. What does this say about their character?" Sarah felt a familiar anger building in her chest, but she kept it controlled. She had learned long ago that anger without purpose was just noise, but anger with direction could move mountains. The session continued for another hour. Delegate after delegate stood to list humanity's failures and weaknesses. They talked about human disease rates, accident statistics, and mortality data. They compared human physical abilities to those of coalition species and found them wanting every time. "Even their military technology is based on projectile weapons," laughed the Krillian. "They throw small pieces of metal at each other. Meanwhile, we have energy weapons that can destroy entire mountains. Their ships barely qualify as spacecraft," added a thermal collective speaker, its voice like the sound of cooling metal. "They strap themselves to controlled explosions and hope for the best. It is amazing any of them survive their own transportation methods." Finally, the session moderator, an ancient ethereal whose species had helped found the coalition, called for the formal vote. "We have heard extensive testimony regarding the human application for membership. All concerns raised are valid and well documented. The recommendation of this assembly is to table the application for further consideration." Sarah knew that further consideration was diplomatic language for rejection. She watched as delegates began to rise from their seats, already making plans to leave. The decision was made. Humanity would remain isolated, cut off from the broader galactic community. But Sarah was not ready to accept defeat. Not yet. She stood up slowly, her movement barely noticeable among the much larger beings around her. But she had learned how to make herself heard when it mattered. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's communication system. The noise died down as delegates realized a human was speaking. Some turned to look at her with curiosity, others with barely concealed amusement. "I am Representative Sarah Chen of the United Earth Coalition," she continued, walking slowly toward the center of the assembly floor. Her footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet space. "I have listened carefully to your concerns about my species." She reached the center of the hall and turned to face the assembled delegates. Hundreds of alien eyes, sensors, and other perception organs focused on her small figure. "You believe we are fragile?" she said simply. "You think we break easily. You see our limitations and conclude we have nothing to offer your alliance." Some delegates made soft sounds that might have been agreement or amusement. Sarah ignored them. "I would like to propose a different kind of test," she continued, her voice steady and clear. "Not of our technology or our military strength. Not of our scientific knowledge or our diplomatic skills. A test of what you claim we lack most: durability." The hall was completely silent now. Even the background hum of the station's system seemed muted. "Any delegate who believes they can demonstrate human fragility is welcome to try," Sarah said, spreading her arms slightly. "If you can break me, then humanity will withdraw its application permanently and never again request membership in the coalition." The silence stretched for several long seconds. Then the Krillian delegate began to laugh, the sound like crystal bells in an earthquake. "Are you challenging us to physical combat, little human?" he asked, his body refracting light as he moved. "Do you understand what you're suggesting?" Sarah nodded calmly. "I understand perfectly. But I also propose stakes for when you fail. When you cannot break me, humanity gains immediate membership in the coalition with full voting rights and participation in all defensive protocols." The laughter stopped. The hall erupted in noise as delegates began talking, clicking, buzzing, and hissing to each other in dozens of different languages. Sarah stood in the center of it all, waiting patiently for their answer. The noise in the assembly hall continued for several minutes. Sarah stood perfectly still in the center, watching as delegates argued among themselves. She could see some pointing at her, others gesturing wildly with whatever appendages their species possessed. The translator system was overloaded trying to convert so many simultaneous conversations. The ethereal moderator finally restored order by increasing the hall's harmonic resonance, a sound that all coalition species found naturally calming. As the noise died down, individual voices became clear again. "This is ridiculous," declared the Vorthak ambassador. "The human is either insane or trying some primitive psychological manipulation." "Perhaps it is a cultural misunderstanding," suggested a harmonious collective speaker. "Maybe their species does not comprehend the physical differences between us." But the Krillian delegate was studying Sarah with new interest. His crystalline features shifted as he moved closer to examine her. "No," he said slowly. "Look at her posture. Look at her eyes. She knows exactly what she is proposing." Sarah met his gaze steadily. Up close, the alien was even more impressive. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his body composed of living crystal that had grown and hardened over centuries. She could see the geometric patterns that ran through his structure, the way light bent and fractured as it passed through him. His species was known for their incredible durability and strength. A Krillian could walk through a plasma storm without damage. "You interest me, human," he said, his voice creating small harmonic echoes. "I have studied your species' military history. You fight wars against your own kind with remarkable persistence, but fighting other humans is very different from facing a Krillian." "I imagine it is," Sarah replied calmly. "Are you volunteering to test your theory?" The crystal being's laugh was like wind chimes in a hurricane. "I am indeed. But I want the terms to be absolutely clear. You are proposing single combat between yourself and any coalition member who accepts the challenge?" "Correct. And if we defeat you, humanity withdraws its membership application permanently?" "Correct. But if you somehow survive our attempt to break you, humanity gains immediate full membership?" Sarah nodded. Those are the stakes I propose. The Krillian turned to address the assembly. Fellow delegates, this human offers us an opportunity to resolve the question of their species' worthiness definitively. If their representative is as fragile as our analysis suggests, we will demonstrate it conclusively. If she is not... He paused, the crystal structures of his face shifting in what might have been a smile. Then perhaps we have underestimated them. Ambassador Torres stood up quickly. Representative Chen, I must protest this course of action. The Coalition Council did not authorize. Sarah raised her hand, cutting him off gently. Ambassador Torres, I appreciate your concern, but I'm acting within my authority as the primary diplomatic representative. The Council gave me discretion to negotiate terms for our membership. They did not give you discretion to commit suicide, Torres hissed under his breath. Sarah ignored him, keeping her attention on the Krillian. Do you accept the challenge? The crystal being looked around the assembly, noting the attention focused on him. Sarah could see him weighing the political implications. If he refused, it might look like cowardice. If he accepted and somehow failed, it would be deeply embarrassing. But if he accepted and succeeded, he would become the delegate who definitively proved human weakness. I accept, he said finally, but I propose we modify the terms slightly. This should not be a private affair. Let all Coalition members witness this demonstration. Tomorrow, in the station's combat arena, I will show the galaxy why humans are not ready to stand beside us as equals. The moderator's harmonic voice filled the hall. The challenge has been issued and accepted. Combat will take place tomorrow at the standard diplomatic hour in Arena 7. All delegates are invited to observe. As the session officially ended, Sarah found herself surrounded by her fellow human diplomats. Torres grabbed her arm as they walked toward the exit. Sarah, what are you thinking? That creature could literally tear you apart with his bare hands. I know exactly what he can do, Sarah replied quietly. I have read every available report on Krillian physiology and combat capabilities. Then you know this is suicide. Sarah stopped walking and turned to face her colleagues. Ambassador Torres, Dr. Nakamura, Commissioner Walsh, I need you to trust me. More than that, I need you to understand something important. The three other humans gathered around her in the corridor outside the assembly hall. Other delegates were passing by, many stealing glances at the small group of humans. Everything they said in there about us was true, Sarah continued. We are physically weaker than most Coalition species. We do require artificial environments to survive in space. We do have shorter lifespans and less advanced technology. Then why? Began Dr. Nakamura. Because they only looked at half the data, Sarah interrupted. They measured what we cannot do. They never asked what we can do that they cannot. Commissioner Walsh frowned. What do you mean? Sarah started walking again, leading them toward the human quarters. Tomorrow you will see what I mean. Tonight I need you to send a message back to Earth. Tell them that win or lose, humanity made its statement to the galaxy. What kind of statement? Torres asked. That we do not break the way they think we do. The rest of the day passed quickly. News of the challenge spread throughout Nexus Prime Station. By evening, delegates from species that had not even attended the assembly session were arriving to witness the combat. The betting pools that sprang up around the station were heavily favored toward the Krillian, with odds of over 100 to 1 against the human. Sarah spent the evening in meditation and light exercise. She ate a simple meal and reviewed her personal files one more time. She recorded a message for her family back on Earth just in case. Then she slept peacefully for 8 hours. The next morning she woke before dawn and prepared carefully. She chose simple athletic clothing that would not restrict her movement. She ate breakfast and drank plenty of water. She did her normal stretching routine and some basic calisthenics. Ambassador Torres knocked on her door an hour before the combat was scheduled to begin. Last chance to reconsider this, he said when she opened the door. Sarah smiled at him. Thank you for your concern, Ambassador. But I am exactly where I need to be. They walked together toward Arena 7. The corridors were more crowded than Sarah had ever seen them. Delegates from dozens of species lined the walls, all wanting to get a glimpse of the human who had challenged a Krillian to single combat. As they approached the arena entrance, Sarah could hear the noise from inside. The combat space was designed to hold several hundred observers, and it sounded like every seat was filled. Representative Chen, came a familiar crystalline voice behind her. Sarah turned to see the Krillian delegate approaching. In the brighter lighting of the arena level, he was even more impressive. The geometric patterns in his crystal body seemed to pulse with their own internal light. "I wanted to speak with you before we begin," he said. "My name is Thralkes. I want you to know that I respect your courage even if I question your judgment." "Thank you, Thralkes. My name is Sarah. I want you to know that I hold no personal animosity toward you or any other delegate. This is not about anger or revenge." "Then what is it about?" Sarah looked toward the arena entrance where the noise of the crowd was growing louder. "Understanding," she said simply. "It is about understanding." Arena 7 was packed beyond capacity. Delegates filled every seat, with more standing along the walls and floating in designated areas for species that did not use traditional seating. The noise was incredible as hundreds of different species expressed their excitement in their own ways. Sarah walked into the center of the arena floor, her footsteps surprisingly loud in the sudden quiet that fell over the crowd. The arena was circular, about 50 meters across, with a smooth polymer floor designed to handle various forms of combat. Overhead, protective barriers would prevent any debris from reaching the spectators, but would not interfere with the fight itself. Thralkes entered from the opposite side, and Sarah heard gasps and clicks of appreciation from the crowd. Under the arena's bright lights, the Krillian was magnificent. His crystal body threw rainbows across the floor and walls as he moved. He stood nearly twice Sarah's height and probably weighed 10 times as much. The arena moderator, a neutral artificial intelligence, spoke through the public address system. "Combat will continue until one participant yields or is unable to continue. Medical facilities are standing by. Combatants, acknowledge your readiness." "Ready," said Thralkes, his voice carrying easily through the space. "Ready?" Sarah replied, though she had to project her voice more forcefully to be heard. "Begin." For a moment, neither combatant moved. They studied each other across the arena floor. Sarah could see Thralkes evaluating her, trying to decide how much force to use. She could almost read his thoughts. Too little, and he might look like he was not taking the challenge seriously. Too much, and he might accidentally kill her before making his point. Sarah made the choice for him. She walked forward slowly, closing the distance between them until she was standing directly in front of the massive crystal being. "I am ready when you are," she said simply. Thralkes looked down at her for a long moment. Then, almost gently, he reached out with one crystalline hand and pushed her shoulder. The force of the push was probably intended to be light, just enough to knock her down and demonstrate the difference in their strength. But Sarah had not been expecting gentleness. The push sent her staggering backward several steps before she caught her balance. The crowd made sounds of amusement. Some delegates were probably wondering if the combat was already over. Sarah straightened up and walked back to stand in front of Thralkes again. "Is that all?" she asked. The Krillian's crystalline features shifted in what might have been surprise. "You want me to use more force?" "I want you to try to break me," Sarah said clearly, her voice carrying to the spectators. That was the challenge. "Try to break me." Thralkes hesitated for another moment, then struck her with a proper blow. His crystal fist caught her in the shoulder and sent her flying across the arena. She hit the wall hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs and sending shockwaves of pain through her body. The crowd erupted in cheers and clicking sounds. Several delegates stood up to get a better view of the fallen human. Sarah lay against the wall for several seconds, testing her body's responses. Her shoulder was probably fractured. She could taste blood in her mouth where she had bitten her tongue. Her head was ringing from the impact, but she was conscious and she could move. She pushed herself up slowly, using the wall for support. Her legs were shaky, but they held her weight. She spat out a mouthful of blood and wiped her face with the back of her hand. Then she walked back toward the center of the arena. The crowd noise died down as they realized the human was still moving. Sarah took her position in front of Thralkes again, though she had to fight to keep from swaying. "Again," she said. Thralkes stared at her. "You are injured." "Perhaps we should—" "Again," Sarah repeated more firmly. The Krillian struck her again, this time with more force. The blow caught her in the ribs and lifted her off her feet. She flew several meters before hitting the floor and rolling. She could hear something crack inside her chest as she came to a stop. This time it took her longer to get up. She had to try twice before she managed to get her feet under her. She was pretty sure she had broken ribs now and possibly internal bleeding. Each breath was painful, but she stood up, and she walked back to face Thralkes. The arena was completely silent now. Even the background noise from the station's system seemed muted. Every eye sensor and perception organ in the place was focused on the small human who kept getting back up. "Again?" Sarah said, though her voice was quieter now. Thrallkess looked around the arena as if seeking guidance from the crowd. Sarah could see confusion in his crystalline features. This was not going the way anyone had expected. "Human," he said slowly. "You are clearly injured. You cannot possibly continue much longer. Why do you not yield?" Sarah wiped more blood from her mouth. "Because you have not broken me yet. I am trying not to kill you. Then you are not trying hard enough." The Krillion's next blow was much harder. Sarah barely saw it coming before it caught her in the midsection and launched her across the arena again. This time she bounced off the wall and lay still for almost a full minute. The silence in the arena was profound. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat and the sound of her labored breathing. She could feel warm wetness spreading across her clothing where internal injuries were bleeding. Her vision was blurry, and she was having trouble focusing her thoughts, but she was still conscious. And she was still alive. She rolled over onto her hands and knees, then slowly pushed herself upright. The effort made her dizzy, and she had to lean against the wall for support. She could see Thrallkess watching her from across the arena, his body language expressing what might have been concern or confusion. Sarah took a deep breath, ignored the sharp pain in her ribs, and started walking back toward the center of the arena. Each step was an effort, but she kept moving. Some delegates in the crowd began making soft sounds. Sarah was not sure what they meant, but the tone seemed different from the earlier amusement. She reached her position in front of Thrallkess and stood as straight as she could manage. "Again," she said. But this time, Thrallkess did not immediately strike. Instead, he leaned down to bring his crystalline face closer to hers. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why do you continue? You have already proven your point about courage. No one questions your bravery now." Sarah met his gaze steadily, despite the pain and dizziness, because, she said, "You still think this is about courage?" Before Thrallkess could respond, she straightened up as much as she could and addressed the crowd in a voice that carried despite her injuries. "You want to see fragile?" she called out. "You want to see something that breaks easily? Then break me, because until you do, you are just proving that you do not understand what strength really means." The arena fell silent again. Sarah could see delegates leaning forward in their seats, hanging on her words. Thrallkess struck her again. The fifth time Sarah hit the arena wall, she did not get up immediately. She lay there for almost 2 minutes, her body shaking from the impact and pain. Blood pooled beneath her on the polished floor. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, but when she finally did rise, something had changed in the atmosphere of the arena. The alien spectators were no longer cheering or making sounds of amusement. They watched in complete silence as the broken human pulled herself upright once again. Thrallkess stood in the center of the arena, his crystalline body no longer throwing cheerful rainbows. Instead, the light refracting through him seemed dimmer, more subdued. His own breathing was becoming labored from the effort of repeatedly striking his opponent. "This is madness," he said as Sarah slowly made her way back toward him. "You cannot continue. Your body is failing." Sarah paused in her walk, swaying slightly on her feet. She wiped blood from her eyes so she could see him clearly. "My body was failing the first time you hit me," she said. "That is not the point. Then what is the point?" Thrallkess demanded, frustration clear in his harmonic voice. Sarah looked up at the thousands of alien faces watching them. She could see confusion, concern, and something else in their expressions. Something that might have been the beginning of understanding. "The point," she said, projecting her voice so the entire arena could hear, "is that you are all asking the wrong question." She took another step toward Thrallkess, though each movement was clearly painful. "You want to know if humans are strong enough to fight beside you, but strength is not about how much force you can apply. Strength is about how much force you can absorb and keep functioning." A murmur ran through the crowd as translators converted her words into hundreds of different languages. "You measure durability by what does not break," Sarah continued. "We measure durability by what breaks and keeps working anyway." Thrallkess struck her again, though Sarah could see the reluctance in his movement. This time the blow sent her tumbling across the floor, and she came to rest near the center of the arena. She lay still for a long moment, long enough that some spectators began to think the demonstration was finally over. Then Sarah began to speak from where she lay. "Do you know what humans call our greatest disasters?" she asked, her voice carrying clearly through the arena's sound system. "We call them opportunities." She rolled over and began the painful process of getting to her feet again. When the supervolcano at Yellowstone erupted and blocked out our sun for 3 years, we did not go extinct. We learned to grow food in artificial light underground. When the asteroid impact killed most of our large animals, we did not starve. We learned to eat smaller prey and developed agriculture. Sarah was upright again, though she had to lean heavily on her knees to stay standing. When plague swept across our continents and killed half our population, we did not give up. We learned about germs and bacteria and viruses. We turned our deadliest enemies into vaccines that made us stronger. She straightened up slowly, facing Thralkes again. When we invented weapons that could destroy our entire planet, we did not use them. We learned control and diplomacy. We turned the power of nuclear fission into energy that lights our cities. The arena was completely silent now. Even Thralkes had stopped moving, listening to her words. "You see fragility where we see adaptability," Sarah continued. "You see weakness where we see resilience. You see failure where we see education." She took a step toward the Krillian, though she was clearly reaching the limits of her endurance. "We do not survive disasters by being too strong for them to affect us. We survive disasters by learning from them, adapting to them, and becoming stronger because of them." Thralkes looked down at the small, bloody human in front of him. "But you are still breaking," he said quietly. Sarah smiled, blood staining her teeth. "Yes, I am breaking, but I am not broken. There is a difference." She paused to catch her breath and continued speaking to the assembled delegates. "Every impact teaches my bones how to calcify stronger. Every tear teaches my muscles how to rebuild with more fibers. Every wound teaches my blood how to clot faster. Every injury teaches my brain new ways to manage pain and maintain function." She looked directly at Thralkes. "You are teaching me how to survive being hit by a Krillian. Next time I will be better at it." "Next time?" Thralkes asked. "If there is a next time. Right now, I want you to finish what you started. You accepted the challenge to break me. So break me." Thralkes hesitated. "I do not wish to kill you." "Then you are not taking the challenge seriously," Sarah replied. "Either I am too fragile to be useful to your coalition or I am not. Either you can break me or you cannot. But standing there holding back is not proving anything to anyone." The Krillian looked around the arena again. He could see that the other delegates were watching intently, waiting to see how this would resolve. His own reputation was now tied to the outcome of this combat. He struck Sarah with more force than he had used before. The blow caught her in the chest and sent her flying across the arena to crash into the far wall. The impact was so severe that cracks appeared in the polymer surface where she hit. Sarah slid down the wall and lay motionless on the floor. Blood spread around her in a growing pool. Her breathing was barely visible. For 30 seconds, the arena was completely silent. Then Sarah's eyes opened. It took her nearly 5 minutes to get up this time. She had to try 3 times before she could get her legs to support her weight. She could barely see through the blood in her eyes. Each breath was agony, but she stood up, and she began the long walk back to the center of the arena. Halfway there, she began to speak again, though her voice was weaker now. "This is what you do not understand about humans," she said. "We do not measure success by avoiding failure. We measure success by how we respond to failure." She reached the center of the arena and stood facing Thralkes, though she was swaying badly now. "Every time you knock me down, I learn something new about getting back up. Every injury you give me teaches me something about enduring pain. Every impact shows me new limits that I can push past." She wiped blood from her mouth with a shaking hand. "You cannot break me, Thralkes. Not because I am too strong to break, but because breaking and being broken are 2 different things, and humans do not stay broken." Thralkes stared at the human standing before him, and for the first time since the combat began, he looked uncertain. His crystalline features shifted as he processed what he was seeing. Sarah stood in front of him, barely able to remain upright, blood covering most of her clothing, but still conscious and still defiant. "You want to know the real difference between humans and the rest of the galaxy?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper, but somehow still carrying to every corner of the silent arena. She paused to steady herself, placing one hand against her injured ribs. "You have all built civilizations that avoid catastrophe. You design systems that prevent failure. You create technologies that eliminate risk. You measure success by how long you can go without facing a crisis. Sarah took a shaky step forward. Humans build civilizations that survive catastrophe. We design systems that function after they fail. We create technologies that work in the worst possible conditions. We measure success by what we can accomplish after everything goes wrong. She gestured weakly toward the crowd of watching delegates. Look around this arena. How many of your species have faced extinction-level events and survived them? How many have had their entire civilizations destroyed and rebuilt them from nothing? A murmur ran through the crowd as delegates considered her question. Sarah continued speaking, her voice growing stronger despite her obvious injuries. Humans have survived ice ages that should have frozen us to death. We survived asteroid impacts that should have wiped us out like the dinosaurs. We survived plagues that killed 90% of our population. We survived wars where we used weapons designed to poison our own planet. She looked directly at Thrall. And we did not just survive these things. We became stronger because of them. Each disaster taught us new skills. Each failure showed us better ways to succeed. Each crisis forced us to innovate and adapt and grow. Thrall slowly lowered his hands. But at what cost? Look at yourself. Look what this demonstration has cost you. Sarah smiled, blood still staining her teeth. This demonstration has cost me some broken bones and internal bleeding. My medical team will have me fully healed within a few weeks. But what has it gained? She turned to address the assembled delegates directly. You were concerned about human fragility. You worried that we would be a liability in combat, that we would break under pressure and become a burden to your forces. But you were measuring the wrong thing. Sarah's voice began to carry more authority, despite her injuries. Yes, human bodies are more fragile than Krillian crystal or Vorthak scales or Zephyrian chitin. Our bones break more easily. Our skin tears more readily. Our organs fail under less pressure. She paused to let this admission sink in. But when those things happen to us, we do not stop fighting. We do not give up. We do not surrender. We adapt, we endure, and we continue to function even when our bodies are failing. Sarah gestured toward Thrall. This Krillian has struck me with enough force to kill most creatures his own size. His crystal body is barely scratched, while mine is broken in dozens of places. By every physical measure, he has won this combat decisively. The crowd waited to hear where she was going with this. But I am still here. I am still standing. I am still thinking clearly and speaking coherently and making strategic decisions. My body is broken, but I am not broken. And that is what you need to understand about humanity. Sarah took another step toward Thrall, though the effort was clearly enormous. When your coalition faces its next great crisis, when the systems fail, and the technology breaks down and everything goes wrong, you do not want allies who cannot function unless everything is perfect. You want allies who specialize in making things work when everything is broken. She spread her arms wide, ignoring the pain the gesture caused. Humans do not bring you superior firepower or advanced technology or unbreakable armor. We bring you the ability to keep fighting when the firepower fails, when the technology breaks, and when the armor is destroyed. A new voice spoke from the crowd. It was the Vorthak ambassador who had been so dismissive the day before. But how do we know you will not simply break under pressure when it truly matters? Sarah turned to face him, though the movement made her sway dangerously. Because we already have, she said simply, over and over again. And each time we break, we learn how to break better. We learn how to keep working while broken. We learn how to fix ourselves faster and come back stronger. She gestured toward the arena around them. This combat is not unusual for humans. We do this to ourselves constantly. We call it training, education, stress testing. We deliberately put our bodies and minds under more pressure than they can handle, because that is how we learn what our real limits are. Sarah looked back at Thrall, who was listening intently. You were trying to be gentle with me at first. You were afraid of breaking something fragile, but humans are not afraid of breaking. We are afraid of not learning from breaking. Thrall slowly sat down on the arena floor, bringing himself closer to Sarah's eye level. His crystalline body was showing signs of stress fractures from the repeated impacts of striking her. I think, he said carefully, that I am beginning to understand. You are saying that human strength comes not from avoiding damage, but from recovering from damage. Sarah nodded, then had to steady herself as the movement made her dizzy. Exactly, and more than that. We get stronger from damage. Every scar tissue is tougher than the original skin. Every broken bone heals back stronger. Every challenge we survive teaches us skills we did not have before. She addressed the crowd again. The coalition has had peace for over 1,000 years. Your species have forgotten what it means to face existential threats. But threats are coming. The universe is not a safe place. And eventually something will test all of you the way humans have been tested. The arena was completely silent as delegates absorbed her words. When that day comes, you will want humans beside you. Not because we are the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but because we are the species that specializes in impossible situations. Sarah finally allowed herself to sink to her knees, though she kept her back straight and her head up. We are the species that does not know how to give up. Thralkes looked around the arena, then back at Sarah. Very slowly, he extended one crystalline hand toward her. Representative Sarah Chen of humanity, he said formally. I concede this combat. I cannot break you. Sarah reached out with her own injured hand and grasped his crystal fingers. Thank you for the lesson. Thralkes of the Krillian Assembly. The arena remained silent for another moment. Then one by one delegates began to stand. The sound started as a low hum from the ethereals, joined by clicking from the Zephyrians and harmonics from various other species. It was applause. Not the mocking laughter from the day before, but genuine respect. The ethereal moderator's voice filled the arena. The challenge has been resolved. By the terms agreed upon, humanity is granted immediate membership in the Galactic Defense Coalition with full voting rights. As medical teams rushed onto the arena floor to treat Sarah's injuries, she heard one more sound. Thralkes was laughing again, but this time the crystalline chimes carried a note of genuine amusement rather than mockery. What is funny? Sarah asked as the medics began their work. I was just thinking, Thralkes replied, that the coalition is going to be a very different place with humans in it. Sarah smiled as consciousness finally began to fade. Yes, she whispered. Yes, it is.